to Hard NOC Life. I'm Keith Chow.
I'm Shawn Taylor.
I'm Dominic Ma.
What's up, y'all? I'm Jamal Michelle.
Welcome back to the podcast, episode 202. What's up, fellas? Happy February. Happy Black History Month. I'm just trying to think what else is going on. What is going on in the world? Happy stimulus check. Are we all getting stimulus checks?
Shoot.
I heard they were called Stimmies after Timothy Chalamet, but I don't know how that could start. The Timothy Chalamet thing makes me feel old, as like 5 Doctor Who's kind of old.
I don't know if you guys have been following the Army Hammer stuff, but Call Me By Your Name and takes on new context, knowing that he could have straight up like Hannibal Lecter dude.
That's so crazy because he denied it, right? I didn't see any. I mean, I didn't follow anything else after, but he had like initially denied it, or he just is. He,
and then, but then someone I think
it?
released his texts online, like screenshots of the stuff where he was like, "I want to drink your blood and eat your liver with fava beans and a nice Chianti." I don't know. Maybe
Right,
he didn't say
normal second day.
Yeah, I just stay out of white folks' business. I'm not anything that it just. Like I said, I could care. I think celebrity is probably the greatest poison that has ever hit our earth. And I care about the art they make. I can, if you're not harmful, I don't care about your life. But this guy seems like he needs to be tranquilized. Like maybe him and Marilyn Manson have like a little like band together or something crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's in the news too. Shit.
I guess I need to go back and delete all my Army Hammer for Batman tweets. Because he's always been my pick to recast as Batman. But not anymore, I guess.
Well,
they're about to get you.
Hey, well, Batman Cannibal, maybe a new series. I mean,
that's an Elseworld. That would explain some things.
The Elseworlds where Batman's a vampire. We'll do that.
Yes.
That is making it too much. Reality fiction line crossed in a bad way there. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's just like the idea of just how many women have to suffer at the hands of like mediocre men is just disgusting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, the whole thing with Marilyn Manson, who I wasn't a fan of, but I always appreciated his creativity as just, he's, because he was this nerdy D&D kid back in the day and he reinvented himself. I'm like, oh, okay, I like his music, but I can dig his trajectory. And then you start hearing, like, what happened. I'm just like, I guess if you, I don't know. It was kind of upsetting, but then I'm realizing that you start hearing him, like, talk and you start really listening to his music and how derivative a lot of that stuff was. And you're just like, oh, man. All these mediocre men are just like harming these women, and it just has to stop some way.
Whenever something like this comes up, whether it's Marilyn Manson or it's Cosby or it's Woody Allen, Miles Davis, like there's always this like, how do you separate art from the artist, right?
Yeah.
It's a conundrum that will exist time immemorial as long as shitty people get to do the shitty things while also creating transcendent art at the same time, Not that Marilyn Manson or Army Hammer or transcendent artists.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah. No.
You know what it is? Today is happy day after WandaVision broke the internet. I know that there are varying degrees of WandaVision fandom on this podcast, but a pretty significant thing happened in the most recent episode of WandaVision. It's kind of hard not to talk about. So let's talk about it. So if you haven't watched WandaVision, I think one of us hasn't, there's a big spoiler warning starting right now. And for probably the next 10, 15 minutes, you might want to skip ahead if you don't want to get spoiled. Or better yet, pause the podcast, throw on Disney Plus, watch the last 90 seconds of the WandaVision episode. Then come back and we can talk about the greatest crossover in X-Men MCU history. Probably the only crossover so far, hinting at further crossovers in the future. But what did you guys think of the huge reveal that Luke Skywalker was the one who answered Grogu's call?
Great. Because we just seen Luke Skywalker in that other series, and he looked much more convincing in this one because the technology apparently advanced in the past 2 months to make him look like Quicksilver from the X-Men Fox movies. I know you were projecting something that you wanted there, Keith, because you love your multiverses.
Right. I wanted Patton Oswalt's Marvel Star Wars crossover.
Even knowing that was probably revealed, there were a lot of people I would hope to have showed up at that door, like one of the Vision relatives, like Viv or someone, like another person to complicate the situation.
Like Vision's wife from the Tom King comics. That would have been dope if that happened.
That would have been a much that I'd been like, but I mean, it was kind of broadly telegraphed a little bit, you know.
Oh yeah.
By earlier when Monica Rambeau was like, oh, but then you see her kind of like glitch out after she mentioned Pietro.
Right.
I mean,
so yeah, we should set the stage for those like who are like listening to us and thinking I'm stupid. So in WandaVision episode 5, it's the version of the show that's set in the 80s. It's definitely like a Growing Pains, Family Ties, Full House homage, which is interesting since Elizabeth Olsen is the younger sister of the Olsen twins. I read earlier that when they rebooted Full House for Netflix, they couldn't get the Olsen twins to play Michelle, so they approached Elizabeth to come back and play Michelle for the Fuller House reboot, and she was like, do you know who I am? I don't need to be on this show.
Really? You will.
But anyway, so in this 80s homage, it ends with an argument between Vision and Wanda, and a doorbell rings and she opens the door. And as Shawn said, she's been talking about Pietro for 5 episodes now, and we see Pietro, but it's Evan Peters who plays Quicksilver in the X-Men movies and Fade to Black.
Kick-Ass.
Which is interesting because the Kick-Ass guy plays Quicksilver. Wait,
yes, I mean,
the Kick-Ass guy is the Quicksilver. Was Evan Peters also in Kick-Ass?
Yeah, the guy who plays Quicksilver in.
But he's not Kick-Ass himself. He's not that guy. He's his friend.
Yeah, he's his buddy.
But right, because Kick-Ass himself is Quicksilver in the MCU.
Yeah.
What?
But I'm confused now. I see.
Wait,
this
what?
is why it's multiverse.
Isn't it Aaron Johnson?
See, we
Isn't that
just
his name?
multiverse confused ourselves.
Right, Aaron Johnson.
Oh shit! No, you're right. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He was Quicksilver all along.
He was Quicksilver in Ultron. So Kick-Ass was Quicksilver in Ultron.
Yes.
His friend is Quicksilver in WandaVision.
X-Men.
Yeah.
So Evan Peters is
X-Men,
also in Kick. I don't remember that.
Yeah,
No.
he was his friend. Yeah.
Oh, see, I probably should.
It was
watch
really
Kick-Ass.
fast. No, it wasn't really fast.
Oh boy.
Aaron
wow.
Taylor Johnson plays Kick-Ass in Kick-Ass.
Yes.
And Evan
then he
Peters plays his
Quicksilver.
friend in Kick-Ass. And
Yes.
both of them play Quicksilver in various Marvel movies. Yeah, it's very confusing.
My overarching thought is still that like WandaVision is very interesting conceptually, but not actually satisfying. And then that is so far the case, and I'm sure something really exciting happens at the end. That's it. Isn't it fascinating that it's always the super speed guy? I mean, it's very much like when Cinematic Flash appears
On Crisis, yeah.
in TV Flash in the DC Crisis event. And for that, again, just conceptually, I think it's exciting. Like, guys, do you realize how close we are to Quicksilver showing up in the Flashpoint movie? Because once you just open up that door, like, people are just going to show up in each other franchises. So we're actually really close to that Justice League Avengers crossover.
Which is funny because I mentioned in our last episode that, or maybe 2 episodes ago, that like DC was the one that was supposed to have the big multiversal movie with Michael Keaton showing up in the Ezra Miller Flash movie, and Marvel's already like, hold my beer, we're going to do the multiverse before you guys can. We don't know if this is the introduction of X-Men Quicksilver, right? Like, it could be a meta move where they cast Evan Peters to play Pietro without saying he's the Fox Quicksilver. You know what I mean? Like, he'd just be a meta thing where they're using, it's kind of like when John Wesley Shipp showed up in Flash, the 90s Flash showed up on the Flash TV show, right? He wasn't actually playing the 90s Flash until Crisis on Infinite Earths when he shows up as the 90s Flash. So yeah, there's a lot of things that could happen in the next episode where we find out if this is actually an X-Men crossover or not. But my question is, if you have never seen the X-Men movies, like, does that ending make any sense to you whatsoever?
It might be confusing, right? Because it depends on which one you've seen. You would have needed to see like a handful that were the arc that maybe a lot of people like jumped off the ship when they started doing the first. I love First Class. I love everything that followed that. Well, not everything, but it's First Class, right? Yeah.
First Class was the reboot, was the soft reboot where they went back.
And that's where they get. That's where he shows up. Yeah,
is he
I don't know.
First Class?
You could be confused.
Or does he show up in
No,
the
he's not in
next
first
one?
class.
He's in the next
Is
one.
it in the second one, right?
Right.
He doesn't
He's in
appear
Days of
until
Future Past.
Wolverine goes back in time to find him in the 70s, right?
But that's still a part of the first
Right,
class.
right. That's
arc,
the
right?
next
I mean, that's
time.
part of that timeline, but
Yeah, first
forgot
class
this.
was so good until the guy who could survive anything gets killed by a white guy. Like, come on,
Oh,
really?
yeah.
yeah, they
Come
just
on,
got him,
Darwin.
killed
He
him.
happens to be the black character. It's like, well, X-Men franchise has done nothing but shitty by all their black characters ever. In
Or just
Logan,
characters of color.
the black
Jesus.
family gets slaughtered first. Like there's always like Marvel hates black people.
New Mutants. New Mutants.
Except for Black Panther and Cage. When you look at like all of the X-Men films, Storm has been trash in every single X-Men film.
Hopefully, Monica Rambeau, they do some shit. They do something.
Hopefully
good
they'll do something good right now. Everybody's all excited, but I'm like, she's done nothing yet.
She's gonna die. She's gonna.
You know what I'm saying? Like she got knocked
gonna
through
die.
4 levels of a house and kicked out of the fourth wall. You know what I'm saying? Like.
You know, my biggest thing about Monica Rambeau in WandaVision so far is that, like, it's really thrown me off that I've been pronouncing Rambeau wrong for the last 20 years. Because she's like, I'm Captain Rambeau. I'm like, it's Rambo? I thought it was Rambeau.
Yeah. Exactly. I know. That high school French has failed me.
Do
No.
you think that Sylvester Stallone hero was really just a misspelling of Rambo this whole time? Because I always thought Rambo was like a weird action hero movie name in the First Blood movie, but maybe it was supposed to be Rambo.
And it makes me think back to her mom in Captain Marvel. Did they ever say her last name in that movie?
Probably once or twice,
she's
right?
Maria
They have
Rambeau.
to.
Yeah,
Did they say, or was it just on the plane? I don't
It might
remember.
have just been the call
I think
sign
it was
on
just
the
I
plane.
think it was just the call sign on the plane.
Oh,
Because
maybe they
if
didn't
she
say her
said my
name out
name
loud.
my name is, what is it, Martha? No, that's not Martha. What's her name?
Maria.
Maria. Martha's,
Yeah.
Martha's the other
Her
superhero
kid is
mom.
Monica.
Who is one of my favorite Marvel characters. I really like how she did, but I'm like,
Yeah, she's cool.
I'd love for her to have her own vibration because there seems to be. I mean, she's a wonderful actress. Oh my god! But I'm just like, everybody's like, yeah, photons are real. I mean, like Guy Copes was saying that a show has to be more than the sum of its Easter eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for me, it just seems like it's there's a lot of fan service that's happening right now, and not in the best possible way. For me, like I said, I had somebody. I think it was the either the writer or the artist of that comic book Black was calling me like all kinds of names. Not names per se, but because I didn't like the show. You could be wrong if you want. I'm like, I'm not wrong. I just you guys will just let Marvel do
you and I
whatever.
disagree
And
about
it's-
WandaVision because I think that they're executing it exactly how they're supposed to.
Now I love it.
But if I could go off that, I mean, that is the problem with too many Easter eggs, because there is this sort of, it's a problem with the multiverse too, because it's the everything is possible so nothing is interesting kind of problem with Wanda's meta, like, super magic control over everything. So Quicksilver could be anything. He could be,
Right.
he could be a brand new character. He could literally have been torn from another movie universe because, Wanda's rules of magic are like that
There are
loosey-goosey. Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, I'm a total jerk for talking about rules in, like, the comic book genre. I get that. But there's one part, if I could rant just for a second, there's one part of this last WandaVision episode that bugged me so much. And, like, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's like it's not even a plot point. It's just like a little style thing. It's like, the part where they're going in with the drone and it's got like Sword is going in and Monica's piloting in, and they're watching Wanda through a fuzzy black and white video camera, and there's something about like it's like old tech, but anyway, it's a drone and with a fuzzy black and white video camera, and they're watching it and they're like, what's she gonna do? And her eyes turn red in the monitor of the fuzzy black white
I thought
video
that
camera.
was awesome. I thought like
That's
Wanda's
that's
powers
what
are
the
so
hell?
amazing that like the fuzzy 80s black and white monitor glows red when she activates. I thought that was pretty cool.
What the hell does that possibly? How does it possibly happen?
Well, but the one thing that took me out of that scene you're talking about, Dom, is that I didn't think that the drone that she was piloting was an 80s tech version.
Yes, I wasn't following that either. What were they talking about? This is 80s tech. That drone did not. That happened in the 80s.
Well, no, that was the point though. The point was that like if they use tech from the 80s, she won't be able to. It won't change. Because what they determine is anything that goes inside the perimeter of Westview automatically changes to match the time frame of whatever period they're in.
Yeah.
So like that's why the agent comes out as a beekeeper or the
Yeah. So I thought they were going to send in a toy helicopter.
So they were going to send in, right. I thought, well, they'll send in some sort of 80s object, and then they show like a Obama drone flying through the skies of Westview.
Well,
and
that's
it's like,
because it was going to change, right?
well,
Like,
they thought it should have. if they brought something that was actually, you know, not anachronistic, it would stay the same. But I don't know. It was that took me out of the fact that it was like not actually like a retro like toy airplane that they were flying in.
Yeah, I didn't track that at all because that drone looked very modern.
The drone was very modern, right? So that was a bit of a.
And the idea that like yes, well the video camera is fuzzy, yes, because it's, you know, there's cosmic radiation or whatever. We get that. But the eyes turning, like her powers reaching into the video camera and creating a special effect just so we know that she's glowing and going to do something bad. To me, that
took you out.
It could have been like this
upsetting.
black and white, right? And then you could have seen just whatever effects are or something.
Because it's a little cheap. I mean, we all know that the secret sauce of these superhero shows is like people glowing and like doing cool explodey powers. But so like pick another way to like increase the drama at that moment.
Yeah, upgrade the TV.
Just other than like completely bizarre random colorization.
Well, I did think it was also interesting that like going off of the idea of, you know, every time they flash back to a retro TV show, it's actually even presented in like 4:3 with the black bars on the vertical sides. And then when they're in the real world, it becomes the cinematic 16:9, you know, widescreen anamorphic. But for the 80s sitcom points of this episode, they kept it in widescreen. Now, whenever they were outside, it was in the anamorphic widescreen. But I thought the aspect ratio change was interesting that they didn't go to like 4:3 for the 80s. But anyway, the one last thing I want to say about the multiversal aspect of this episode, where they're potentially pulling someone from the Foxverse into the MCU, is that if they can do that, then couldn't they also pull Human Torch from the Foxverse?
That would be Chris Evans.
And what happens when
in your dreams?
Please let it be Chris Evans at least.
Or whichever Human Torch. Like I want to watch the episode where Killmonger and or Captain America have to confront their versions of Human Torch. I think that would be funny. Anyway,
no, but that ending. One thing I will say is that the only time I felt any real excitement about the show was when she went outside after, is this yours? And she had the drone in her hand. Yeah. Like that scene and all the guns were moving. You know, first of all, when was she telekinetic? But that's a whole different story. Like there's a lot of powers that she has that we haven't really seen already full up. But that scene alone and the way it was shot, the genuine look and surprise and all the sword agent's face is like that scene and how like, oh, Wanda's badass as hell.
Yeah.
Like she is like, you know, this is no more mutants Wanda. Like this is
which is where they may be going. Like,
yeah. Yeah, I was like, okay, this to me is dope because even though they're like, you know, proxy mutants, fake mutants, you know, that's the whole high evolutionary storyline and all the rest. But I guess in the movies, it's what the Struckers did, whatever to them, whatever. But that scene, that to me was the best part of the entire series. So actually, it's a lie. Second best part. First best part was the whole magic act. That actually genuinely touched me. Like that was funny to me.
You mean in the second episode?
In the talent show, yeah.
In the talent show.
Yeah.
Like that part really got me. Like, okay, this is actually really clever. And one thing is, what's weird, I don't know why I don't like it, because Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen are acting their behinds off.
Yeah,
they're
really
acting. They're incredible actors, but the storytelling itself is just it just doesn't get me. And people are like, you got to be more patient. It's not about patience. It's like shit. I sat through 2.5 seasons of Deep Space Nine so it can get good. It's like it's not about it's not about. I sat through X-Files.
You know what needs to happen? Elizabeth Olsen needs to shave her head and grow a goatee.
And become
Hawk. That'll be dope.
A witch called Hawk.
It reminds me of Legion when I was told I need to have patience for that, and after the first episode, I never went back to it. I will never go back to that.
I still haven't gone back to Legion.
Really terrible ass show.
But I agree about Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen, and it kind of, I said this I think in their first episode where they have more screen time in one episode of WandaVision than they had the entirety of the
exactly,
so
and they're
far.
acting their behinds off,
and they really do have great chemistry, whether they're the tropey sitcom relationship, or even in this episode where you see the real Vision and Wanda kind of emerge a little bit. Like they do.
And that argument though was just such a beautiful buildup. Here's this machine being more human than this human is, right? And then there's something about that I thought was.
I'm telling you, Shawn, there's some
me.
stuff in here that's worth.
No, there's great stuff in there, but as a whole, it's like having a real dope part of the puzzle is like Neuschwanstein Castle, then the other part of the puzzle is 7-Eleven. Like, these don't even go together. Like, what happened to this? Doesn't even go together. But there's some, like I said, there's wonderful elements, and then the mythology, and like, you know, is the neighbor really, you know, Harkness? Like, who knows? Like, Agatha Harkness, like, what's going on? You know, Mephisto's probably going to show up, so you can tie that in with Doctor Strange. Like, who knows what's going to happen? But
yeah, and it's clear that that's the direction they're going. I think that
there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of great stuff, but as an overall experience, it's just not hitting for me.
I will say that the point you made about the acting is spot on. I think to me the best acting for me this episode was when Vision talks to his coworker Norm, and then he wakes him up for a second, and then when he goes back to his sitcom life, like that, just on the face acting alone was amazing. You know, like he goes from like tropey sitcom acting to like panic back to tropey sitcom, and it's all in the dude's face. Like he's such the guy that I wish I should have looked up his name. He's such a brilliant actor to be able to do that, and I was super impressed by that.
Sort of like Breaking Bad, there's really something to the story of, you know, the lengths you'll go to preserve this idyllic fantasy life, which in this case looks like American TV, and like how much savagery you'll do to achieve that.
Right.
But I think going to the point of we didn't spend quality time with Vision and Scarlet Witch before, this feels like a sort of fill in the blanks based on knowing stuff from the comics.
Sure.
So we don't quite, I'm still not feeling the feeling of being possessed, the feeling of like we're going through this weird sitcom pantomime. Because, I mean, like one of the great body horror problems is like, I'm not really in control of what I'm doing. I'm in this universe and I don't even really like, you know, have an awareness of why I'm going through these motions of family life. But we don't know enough about their baseline characters, I think, to distinguish that. That's just me.
I think you're right, though. Like, we only get hints of it, right? Like, you have in the first episode where the boss and his wife, you know, he's choking to death, and she's just, stop. Like that's the creepy, like, David Lynchian part of the first episode, right? Or you have the scene in I think it was the third episode in the 70s when his neighbor's cutting the bushes, and he can't, you know, he starts cutting through the brick wall because it's like he's not in control of his body. And I think the Norm moment where he's going back and forth from like panic to like sitcom-y, I think you're right. We get it in like bits and pieces, but you don't have enough of and I think that's also the Marvel Cinematic Universe way, where like they never get too serious, especially now that we see the real world, and you have like Kat Dennings and Randall Park kind of like bringing the, you know, everyone loves like the real world stuff. I actually find the real world stuff the least interesting. Like the only interesting stuff I found in the real world so far was showing the blip and Monica reemerging from the snap.
That hospital scene was kind of like, whoa.
Yeah, that was the best.
Intense.
That was the only,
especially now it really hit kind of hard.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
like,
no.
Everyone panicking in the hospital all at once.
Right.
What's going on? Not enough space because people are flooding in. Anyway.
And I thought they did a much, you know, like the return is played for laughs in Spider-Man Far From Home, and to like see like what it would really be like if you just like had folks emerging out of nothingness. You know,
I think they were giving us a moment to pause too, because right after Endgame, right after Infinity War, we already felt how overwhelming and sad it was. But to see it again,
yeah,
and we, and Tony Stark is dead, so to get us feeling more pain on top of pain in Pete's world, even more so than the pain of like losing Tony Stark would have been overwhelming. So they're like, how about we get a little comic relief here?
Yeah, right.
But the
and showing it from a layperson's point of view. It's not about how it affected the heroes. It's like, here's what the nurse, the doctors, the EMTs, like that to me is way more interesting. That's one thing I think that Marvel has always had over DC was the real world lived in feeling. Because DC, Gotham, Metropolis, Star City, Coast City, there's an abstraction there. But I think one thing Marvel has always really done was like, even with their TV shows, like the DC TV shows, which I love, feel hollow, right? They feel hollow. Whereas you look at Daredevil, I've been to that restaurant. I've been to that street corner. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it felt more lived in. So there's something about what I think Marvel does infinitely better on television now. Because not before, but now than...
Well, and to your point, like, that's always been the divide between Marvel and DC. Like, Marvel exists in the real world. Like, the Baxter Building's in New York City. You know, Strange's headquarters is in Bleecker Street. Like, it's not... Whereas, like, the Gotham City, Star City, Central City, Like everything in DC is a made up place, and everything in Marvel is real.
And you feel that in the television shows. Even that in the television shows, those fake locales feel fake.
Right. Well, no, it feels like Vancouver.
Like I said, they feel fake. And I love Vancouver, but it's just like, Hollywood to the north is a different vibration now. I mean,
and you could only shoot so many places before you start like crossing over in real like. How is that Central City, but also Metropolis, and also Gotham City, and also Star City? It's the same freaking corner.
And also Myanmar, and also like how is that gonna work, man?
Also, can I just say, one more thing about this last WandaVision episode? I thought the paper towel thing was kind of in bad taste. I don't know how you all felt about that.
Like naming it Lagos?
Yeah, without being... Well, I was going to be not hyper spoilery about it. But, to the Easter egg thing, if you're gonna, you don't need to make one of the major cities of the world into an Easter egg to serve the main character's problem of feeling guilty about this time. That time when, she sacrificed a whole bunch of black people basically for the service of the plot of the movie. And to reduce that into this... I get the joke of the ads commenting on things, but that one to me was like, that wasn't.
And what's the purpose of mispronouncing it?
Yeah, I don't even know how you say that usually.
It's pronounced Legos.
Oh, okay.
But what was the purpose of mispronouncing it? What is that? Does it serve a purpose? It's like that one. I know a lot of my friends are like, really? Why did they do?
It's a real place. It's not Hydra. It's an actual place.
Yeah.
But relatively minor in the in the big scale of things.
Well, I was going to segue when we were talking about fictional places in the Marvel Universe to the next Disney Plus series that was announced. 5 minutes after we stopped recording our podcast last week, it was announced that Ryan Coogler was going to sign a 5-year exclusive deal with Walt Disney Studios and bring not only the Black Panther sequel, but a Disney Plus series about Wakanda writ large. And I just want to get everyone's take on that, since it sounds like something we should have talked about last week, but we didn't because we record this on Sundays and release it on Mondays. And like I said, it was announced as soon as we hit stop on the record button. So what do you guys think about, one, and this kind of goes back to how we talked about what does a Black Panther sequel look like without Chadwick Boseman? And I think some of the things we talked about, perhaps doing a sequel that's more about Wakanda. But if they're doing a series about Wakanda, how is that going to inform the sequel?
That's a heavy duty thing. Because for me, I think I wasn't a fan. I'm not a big fan of how Black Panther is treated in the comic books. And everybody always calls me the biggest hater. I'm not the biggest hater. I'm actually an easy sell. A galactic empire of Wakanda, I'm like, come on. That just, it's just let's banish the black guy someplace else. I'd rather have him fight. I love the whole thing with the Wakanda Atlantis. I love that. I love the whole Doctor Doom thing. But for me, I think if you can do a Tales of Wakanda like you would do a Watchmen, because Watchmen was loosely connected, but it was really an anthology series that was a different kind of genre per episode. Mm-hmm. And so I would love if you're going to treat the Wakanda's series as, say, a Afrofuturist Twilight Zone. Ooh. I'm all in. I'm all in. I'm there every single day. Like I said, I root for everything, and I give it 5 episodes. If I'm not satisfied, I stop. Like comic books, I buy the first 5 issues, and after the 5th issue, if I'm not sold, I'll take it off my subscription list. But if they do it like I said, an Afrofuturist Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, even if they want to turn it into an adventure type thing, because you can explore. There's so much of the Wakandas that we haven't seen, right? And if they keep the same energy as the movie, if it does things to repair Black cultural distance, despite it being fictional, I think that's why, because nobody cared about Black Panther so much as Wakanda, right? Because what Wakanda did was give Black folks something they never had: cosmology, in the diaspora, cosmology, a geographic location to be in, gods, all these things. What Mutabaruka says, slavery isn't African history; slavery interrupted African history. And so Wakanda was like, what would that history be if we were interrupted? Granted, it's fanciful and sci-fi and whatever, but there's something about being able to even imagine that. I think that's why Afrofuturists thought, shout out to Dr. Alondra Nelson, who's the godmother of Afrofuturism. And if you're not talking about her, I don't trust your words on Afrofuturism. But like being able to like think differently about who you are in the world in relation to technology, in relation to statecraft, in relation to it's that I'm super excited. I'm almost more excited for that than I am a Blade, but Blade inches it out for a little bit for me.
It would be cool to see like something that brings in someone like myself. I'm pretty new to all this stuff. Like I'm new to the comics, to characters, all this. Like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was like the first real superhero experience for me. And even after that, I hadn't picked up a comic book in, I think, ever. And then Marvel movies for me, I'd say I'm like a real casual kind of a fan.
Sure.
Especially like surface level, amateurish hold on the comic book heroes now that exist in DC and then that exist in like Marvel. So it would be cool if they can bring people in like myself who are just starting to like jump into the fray now and that feel connected because the movies have so much to offer and they're so rich. It would be cool. It would also be cool if they just don't like overwhelm the series with just Easter eggs without even establishing the world or establishing the relationship that we'll build with the characters. So for me, I'm like, how can a new guy like me get in with the lack of knowledge that I have compared to like the broader audience that's going to be coming to this, like having read series and stuff, and I haven't read much about Black Panther or the comic, you know what I'm saying?
The appeal of the MCU is that it found the sweet spot between casual fans and the hardcore, like, right? Like there's enough Easter eggs for like hardcore fans, but it's not overwhelming, or it's not like the only thing. It's not like Rick and Morty where like you can only, it's only for these fans who like are too smart for. I mean, I think that goes back to Shawn, your issue with some of the commentary around WandaVision, right? Like this idea that like there's the right way to watch it and there isn't. Like the MCU has been really good about, you know, because if you think of like we said, 10 years, 23 movies, countless episodes of like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and stuff. Like if we really want to take the totality of the MCU, it's a lot to digest, but somehow.
But it's also one of the greatest feats in modern popular culture history.
Yeah.
It's you. I mean, you can't.
You don't have to be a professional nerd to follow the MCU, right? Like to your point, Jamal, like you were a casual fan, and I think that's the thing that I still think the greatest divide between the Marvel movies and the DC movies right now is that the DC movies are confused about, do they want to appeal to the broadest audience or do they want to have like the narrowest, you know? That's why I always am wary of like whenever a producer or director says like, we're only doing this one for the fans.
Or like fan service.
Right. They get them on stage at Hall H and like, this one's for you and only you. And you're the only ones who can possibly ever know what's going on screen.
And it's always the asshole fans.
Yeah. Right.
It's never the fans that are pluralistic and dope. It's the Rick and Morty fans. It's the...
Like, I want to enjoy Rick and Morty, but I can't divorce like the show from its fandom. And the show's, I mean, some of it's smart and I like it enough, but it's not enough where I'm like, I want to go bark at a McDonald's employee over fucking...
And go get a tattoo, you know, and Szechuan sauce, and which is, we can all talk about. And it's so funny how many Rick and Morty fans are mad racist, but what's the guy's last name? What's Rick's last name?
What is Rick's last
No, I was
name?
kidding. Sanchez.
So, Sanchez. But y'all are racist and talking about no Mexicans, but you like somebody... Okay, let me just stop. I hate those fans, sorry.
I think it's because it's kind of like we're at a sort of a cultural inflection point now where watching a thing for enjoyment might not be the case anymore. Because right, you have like you have the blogs and the YouTube channels, and you have the follower count and the hot takes that we have to drop. So you would have to commit considerable time to try and parse it in ways that the person who's casually watching it won't be able to analyze and won't be able to take your audience away from you. But this is problematic, you know? Why can't we just watch a thing to enjoy it and not have to have read like fucking 100 volumes of a thing,
right? Or
viewed like the prequels or the whatever came before it, you know what I mean? And I think about Lord of the Rings a ton too, because the films I love more than the text, more than the literature, but you get shit for that in the world of like academia, or at least from like my English major friends, you know, who would probably turn their nose up at the films because they got it wrong compared to the book. But it's like,
oh,
but the films are better than the books.
Yeah, the films
right.
are,
So you know what I mean?
It's
It's
films
like
are like the case where they are better than the books.
Tolkien Tolkien was a wonderful world builder. He was a linguist.
Peter
He's a
Jackson,
cartographer. You know, yeah, but Tolkien wasn't a good storyteller.
Right, exactly. And you get someone who's able to do that on screen, then you're like, oh shit, so this is what it's really about. You know, that's why I really respect like Peter Jackson's work on
It's so
things.
funny because my daughter's like, she's typically the type that every adaptation is worse than the book, right? Like, I mean, she's a huge voracious reader and she loves like all the YA stuff. But like every movie based on the books she's read, she doesn't like, right? Like the Harry Potter movies are not as good as the books. The Hunger Games movies are not as good as the books, blah, 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 right? The Percy Jackson movies are terrible versus the books. But the one case where she's like, no, the movies are better are the Lord of the Rings movies. Because she said she's tried reading the books and she's like, he spends 40 pages talking about trees. I'm not reading this book.
Oh my God. I mean, the thing about it is what's super crazy about it was that, like, here's a guy. Let's do a Lord of the Rings episode. Let's just not get into the weeds of that because I actually am a Tolkien scholar. So, but let's move that on. Because I can go into the weed because it said there's just, I mean, the stuff that he did, like, you know, I watched the extended remixed Timberland remixed 12-inch versions of these films, and they're incredible. They're astonishing films, and they hold up. I mean, we won't talk about The Hobbit; it's a different story. Right. But the Lord of the Rings films hold up in a way that so many films, like even the first 3 Star Wars films, don't.
Well, I'm in the school that I don't think they hold up very well. To me, there's like too much like, you know, trying to restore the White City and all that shit in the movies.
I mean, it is. Well, it's
there's a lot of racism in those movies.
Oh, it's like, I mean, Tolkien. I mean, like Lord of the Rings is definitely, and people try to like counter the fact that he was a World War II. He was pro-Jew. He was pro this and that. I mean, but like, come on.
All the bad guys are dark-skinned people from the Far East and the Global South, right? Like, just I mean, happens to be.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's go.
Right, we got all that on the issue of faithfulness to the original text in academic circles. Which is
how faithful? If you're going to be that faithful, are you guys excited at all for the Amazon Lord of the Rings show? I don't know how to feel about that.
I was super hyped for it, but then I'm just like, I got confused, and wasn't there supposed to be like a movie? And I don't know. I remember seeing news about that years ago. Wasn't there news about this stuff like a long time ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
I mean, it's been in development for a minute.
Yeah. So I don't know. I kind of just forgot because there's just no more news. So I'm like,
well, I want to touch on something real quick before we wrap up, and it's some comics news, but you know, typically we talk about like speaking of the source material, we talk about the adaptations of the comics, right? We never really talk too much about the comics themselves, but you know, both Marvel and DC are going through some big, as per usual, right? Like the big, you know, crossover event, the big era-defining crossover events that happen to have words like Infinite and Crisis, or you know, whatever in their titles.
Or event.
It's the event comics. Marvel's they're redoing Heroes Reborn again.
They should call the next one Infinite Event. They should just call it that. Just put it all out there. Sorry, that's
it's like, you know, they've had Final Crisis, Infinite Crisis,
Infinite Tentpole. Okay, sorry, go on.
It's funny because DC, like ever since the New 52, I feel like has been rebooting and doing these event comics like every 6 months now, because there was like Rebirth and then the Death Metal, and which I don't actually dig at all, but whatever. That's
Wonder Woman Dead Earth is probably one of the dopest comics ever.
Is it? I don't know.
That's not. I don't think that's part of the Death Metal series though, but it's such a good book.
The death metal stuff is just, I don't know. It's too much for me.
The Batman who laughs.
You don't like there being 9 different interdimensional Batmans? I mean,
the best time you had that was when it was the Batman planetary crossover. Like that was the best one of showing like the Camp Batman, the Grim Batman, the Hunky Batman. Like for me, that was the best multiverse Batman ever. Yeah. Warren Ellis. But outside of that, nah.
Well, there was some controversy over the weekend with the new DC crossover event, which is entitled, I forgot what it's called. Infinite Frontier. Infinite
Frontier.
It's not a crossover with Star Trek.
Yeah.
Sounds like a My Chemical Romance song.
Well, it's funny, right? Because of like the Final Frontier is another thing that's always in a DC event, so that's coming. In Bleeding Cool, which is a comics news website run by everyone's favorite scooper Rich Johnson, he blew up the internet when he revealed that Black Adam is going to be called Shazadam, or Shazadam, or I don't know how to pronounce this. And the internet went crazy, and DC didn't deny it, but Brian Michael Bendis, who's writing the Justice League comic that's going to be part of Infinite Frontier Final Crisis, it basically said rumors are stupid. The PR guys for DC were like side-eyeing every Bleeding Cool tweet, and they didn't recant their initial report though. They did publish an exclusive page from the upcoming Infinite Frontier. Is it Infinite? I can't get my adjective straight. That shows some people calling Black Adam Shazadam. So, long story short, what do we think of this whole controversy? Like, is this a dumb thing to get worked up over, or not?
It's a stupid name, but it's a dumb thing to get worked over. Like, I mean, I think Black Adam. First of all, let's just talk about the name again. But
why is he called Black Adam? I've never known. I mean, it's a fine name with me, but
I know Egyptian, of course, because there's no other country in Africa at all in comic books.
Could have just been Black.
Well, he's not even Egyptian. He's not even Egyptian. He's from like a fake Egypt. I forgot what it was called.
Because there is no real world. There's no real countries in Kandar or something like that. I think.
Yeah, but everything is like it's funny. I know. Dumb name, dumb controversy. Like who cares? Like for me, it's just stupid. The name is dumb. Of course, there's going to be somebody going to say something dumb in the comics. If you do it as a good character moment, that could be really interesting. Like, like the Denny O'Neil, Green Arrow, Green Lantern crossover when the black guy's like, you never come down here and help us. You always help the other stuff. And like, as heavy-handed as that was, it's dope. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's actually, it was a dope moment to like, yeah, let's call these superheroes out for being like wildly white supremacist.
And I think the people getting worked up over it is a couple of things. Like one, there's this idea that like, to Dominic's question, like, why is he called Black Adam to begin with? And if you like look at like who's the A to Z of like DC characters, there's a lot of superheroes that have black in their name who aren't even black, which is another thing. Like that you even have characters like the Black whatever character. You have like Black Vulcan, Black Lightning. You know what I mean? But then you have like Black Canary and Lady Blackhawk, Black Widow.
A lot of black characters have black in their name, which is just like doubly like questionable. So just what are you aiming for here?
I mean, like think about the Super Friends. You had Samurai, Apache Chief, Black Vulcan. Like,
oh god,
oh my god,
Blackity Black and Black.
I know, God.
CB4 gift,
Black
right?
Man, Wonder Black, Blackosaurus Rex. Is this like?
I just want to hear it. I want to hear it. I want to hear it on film or TV. And then I think I'll be good. So I want to hear him do Shazam.
Was it trying to get it out of Black Adam and to be like Shazam was preferable to that? I still don't.
Well, that's the thing. Well, that was, I think, part of the reporting from Bleeding Cool is that, like, in an effort to be more PC, I don't know why that's more PC to call him Shazam. But at the same time, like, they're also centering Black Adam as a major character because of the Rock movie that's coming out in a couple years. So.
Which
I just want to hear The Rock say that.
Right. I'm curious about that conceptually. Isn't Black Adam, I mean, like, doesn't Black Adam work in, like, being pretty brutal and grim as this, like, a superhero heavy?
He's supposed to be the original origins, like, Teth Adam, and he's, like, the son of Ramses II, and, like then he was a corrupted ancient Egyptian pharaoh, but then it's Kandak and then not Egypt. It's like, okay. I mean, I guess when you buy it when you take it from Fawcett and you bring it over into DC proper, there's going to be all types of things that you're going to have to retcon and like weed out. But it's just The Rock is doing everything he can not to play a villain because now they're trying to play him as an anti-hero. It's like, dude, just be a villain.
Yeah, because everything The Rock does is like light and like in the Captain Marvel universe seems like.
But he reminds me of Will Smith. Yeah, like everything. Dwayne Johnson's Dwayne Johnson. Like he always plays Dwayne Johnson. Will Smith always plays Will Smith. Yeah. So I don't want him to The Rock it up. I don't want him
except for
please don't do a wrestling movie. He's going to do a wrestling
movie. The Rundown was one of the dopest movies he's ever done. I'm like, why is there not a sequel? The Rundown's incredible.
Well, and the funny thing about all of this is the idea that The Rock doesn't want to play a villain is that like he came to prominence in the WWF as a heel.
As a heel.
Right. It wasn't until he like when he first came out, when he was Rocky Maivia, the babyface. No one gave a shit about him. It's not until he like came out full on heel, like the persona of The Rock was his heel persona in wrestling.
Right, even as The Rock, that would happen too, right? Even though he'd want to be more hero than not, he still ended up doing those things that you're like, no, why Rock? But listen, if he does a wrestling move in this next movie, I
want to see him people's elbow somebody as Black Adam. That's what I
Rock or the eyebrow raise.
Boy, man, and then scream Shazam, and that's cut to black. I'm sold.
Cut to black.
That's it. Right after. Boom.
Cut to Black Adam.
Well, the reason I wanted to bring up Shazam, you're right, because it's a dumb thing to get worked over. But I did see something that you had said, Shawn, about how part of the idea of even calling him Shazam is that like there's something that we had said on the podcast that like DC has how did you word, like, DC's ashamed of their characters, right? Like, there's a sense of, like, we don't want...
Or Warner's ashamed.
Or AT&T, maybe. And that leads me to, like, the last thing I want to touch on is the... We got a rating for the 4-hour Snyder cut. And it's funny that we were talking about the Hobbit movie, because that was also an extended cut that was rated R of children's material. But we got that the 4-hour Snyder cut is going to be R-rated for language and violence. How do we feel about an R-rated Superman movie?
I hope it's not tasteless. Like, you can be... I wonder why they're doing that or how it's going to be delivered, because you can deliver it in a way that is, like, botched. Or, I don't know, I think it set up expectations that... I don't know. There are strange expectations. I feel strange about it. Like, I don't know what to expect. Is Superman going to say fuck? Is that what's going to happen? Is that
apparently Batman will. Zack Snyder's already said, like, Batman drops
right. So it's like, well, what does that even mean? And then I think of people like, I mean, I think of films like Deadpool that that's a necessary R. So why is this R? Is this R to get that, like, sort of attention or to build expectation in a way? I don't know. I feel strange.
Because I think, like, he's like, Zack Snyder is like Michael Bay light. It's like there's this level of aggression and grim, and, like, because, like, you look at something like Sucker Punch, he's a visual master. Like, he is a master of the visual world. You know, we could talk about storytelling chops at another time, except for the Dead movie, which is incredible. I mean, even 300, visually incredible.
Yeah, just watched that. Just rewatched that.
Okay. But there's something about, there's this level of, like, testosteronic cinema, like, it's almost like those old Canon films from back in the day, or Carolco films or whatever. It's like back in the day, it's like, you know, Delta Force and, like, all these, like, crazy films. There's a level of this hyper white boy aggression that we see in some of these directors that actually has no place in it. Like, Superman as grim doesn't work because Superman is supposed to be the beacon of hope. An R-rated Batman I could get behind, which, like, you know, you're looking at, like, you know, the new Batman film, you're like, oh, wait a minute, okay,
right? Because it looks like a Seven movie or like a
exactly
Zodiac movie.
That makes sense to me. But having a Superman and being R-rated, and then an Aquaman, you know, who's like an aquatic biker, and you got, like, all the, you know, all these things. It's like, why are we making it so aggressive when? I mean, you can still be serious and still have the PG rating. Because if you think about, like, say something like Goonies, was that PG-13 maybe?
Mm-hmm. And no, that was PG. I think that was just straight up PG.
PG? It was PG?
I don't think they had PG-13 in...
They're going to put the chunky... What was the first PG-13? Was it Poltergeist?
No, it was Temple of Doom. Temple of Doom was the first PG-13.
Temple of Doom. Yeah, and they're going to put little man's hand in a blender. Like, that's horrifying, but they still were able to balance the really serious, grim nature of... Because Goonies is actually traumatic, if you look at it.
It's wild. But like, if you go back to the 80s, like, how many PG movies in the 80s, like, would not be PG now? Like, you talked about
many.
You talked about recently on your social medias about, like, the batshit era of movies in the 80s.
82 to 86, man. It was Looney Tunes. But for me, it's like stuff. Having a rated R superhero movie that's, like, not Kick-Ass or not Watchmen, that's, like, already brutal in the comic books, doesn't make sense to me. Will I watch it? Yeah, because it's at home. I wouldn't go to the theater to watch it. And like I said, I always, no matter how much I get spit on and kicked, I'm always rooting for DC.
Yeah.
Because I think DC deserves to have the Marvel status, but they just can't get their act together.
But wait, here's my question. I mean, were you going to watch Justice League with your kids anyway? I mean, does that just...
My daughter watched 13 seconds of it. She's like, this is stupid. and left. Like, was like, makes no sense. That's not how Superman
to your point, Dominic, I think that's part of why I'm a little disappointed in it. Because on the one hand, I do think R-rated superhero. There are a place for certain R-rated superheroes. To Jamal's point, like Deadpool has to be R-rated. Or if you create, like, all new versions of superheroes to kind of, like, if you want to do commentary on the Justice League without actually, like, defiling the Justice League, that's why, like, The Boys is popular. You know what I mean? That's what Watchmen was about, right? It was, like, taking these Charlton Comics characters and, like, commenting on them. But when you have the actual, like, Wonder Woman, Batman, Aquaman, it's kind of hard for me. I think I talked about this with Titans. It's this idea that, like, you have these, like, kid-friendly characters. Like, before the DC Universe / HBO Max show, who is the biggest audience for Teen Titans characters? It's Teen Titans Go on Cartoon Network, right? It's my daughter. You know, would think...
Yeah. So it's a little off-putting, right?
Yeah, that they would want to watch a live-action version of the Teen Titans, and they're in the colorful costumes, and, you know, Dick Grayson's like, fuck Batman, and driving garden shears in someone's crotch, and it's like... to like Sean's daughter. My daughter saw like 5 seconds of the trailer for Titans and was like, no, thank you.
And I mean, ironically, the appetite for that so-called adult content is so juvenile. It's like,
Right.
oh, we're going to see some blood. We're going to see some boobs. We're going to see someone get their head blown off.
Yeah, kids
like,
don't wanna see
that's
that.
not... That's not a filmmaking concern.
The transition is awkward because those things were not organically or originally are.
Yeah.
Or originally violent. Not at their inception, they're soft and they're smooth, and that's okay. You don't have to transition it into this, hard-nosed whatever. But something like Deadpool, since his inception, he's quirky, raunchy, and violent. So it works on film. But Batman, I mean, with the blue underwear, but like...
I mean, see, and it's funny,
I
though,
know, it's
because like
awkward.
I rail against R-rated superhero movies all the time, but yet I was reminded on Facebook this week that it was exactly 1 year ago I was in a theater, the last time I was in a movie theater, watching Birds of Prey. And we've talked about how much we love Birds of Prey on this podcast, an R-rated superhero movie. So
I watched it again last night.
It's talking about holds up, right? Like, so I'm of two minds, right? Like, I think I can hold multiple thoughts at once and feel like, yes, there are a place for R-rated superhero movies, but like, is the Justice League the one? Because it reminds me of like the Hobbit.
No, it's not. It's
Right.
an easy answer. It is in a place like Daredevil and Jessica Jones. Those Netflix series are a perfect example of a slightly matured up adult storyline in Mysterio's. A little bit extra violence and seriousness, but not in Justice League because you've got Aquaman flying around. Although I do kind of swimming around. Sorry, my bad. Go ahead.
Well, no, right, exactly. So I think, it's funny that we brought up Tolkien in this episode because it reminds me of when The Hobbit Battle of the Five Armies came out. And, like, they hyped up the director's cut of Hobbit 3 was going to be R-rated. And I was like, The Hobbit? You're making what's next? Like the R-rated version of Anne of Green Gables? Like,
who is excited by that?
Specifically,
who is excited by that?
Are we going to get the hard R, Wind in the Willows? Like, what are we talking
Little
about?
House on the Trap. We're going to get Little House on the Trap. That's going to be the next one we're going to have.
How many children's books do we really need R-rated versions of? You know what I mean? But anyway, we're going to leave it at that. What's nerd popping for everybody this week? Dominic, what's nerd popping for you?
Oh, I was going to say, it's going to be Lunar New Year. It's also Black History Month. And I could think, if we all knew that, like, New Year's 2021 was kind of, nothing to get excited about because it was an artificial ending, and also, we didn't know if, like, Inauguration Day there was going to be tank battles or what. But I like to think for people who might need some symbolic closing off of the terribleness of last year and cycling through to a new thing, we could find a meaningful cycling through point in this month with things like Black History Month celebrations and Lunar New Year, just, going on to the next thing. That's my hope.
Awesome. Jamal, what's nerd popping?
I really appreciated that, Dom. And to go with the theme of Black History Month, this Friday, a film about a civil rights leader who was killed by the state, who was trying to help black communities, Judas and the Black Messiah. I wrote about it on the Nerds of Color blog. Exceptional film, incredible, about the life and times of Fred Hampton. It is a necessary watch, just like When They See Us and Selma and all the other really necessary films on these historical black figures. Hits theaters this Friday. Hopefully folks can just chill at home and watch it on HBO Max because we still got shit going on. So
do not go to the theater, people.
Yeah, don't. But watch the movie.
Should never again. Should.
Sean Taylor, what's nerd popping?
The end of the Expanse of the season of the Expanse, the season finale. How they hate, Cass Anvar, as we know, was accused of multiple sexual indiscretions, and how they got rid of him off the show was actually so mundane. People are complaining about it. I'm like, but that's what death is, right? Death is really mundane a lot of the times. Elvis dies on the toilet. Some people die, doing whatever. It's just death isn't like the spectacular operatic thing. It just happens. And so for me, it was really poignant because I really liked the character, but the guy itself, like I said, you find out these things about people and they turn to trash. And there's a comic book called, I don't want to get it wrong, so I always will, but it's called A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which is actually a film as well from 2014. But this comic is a sequel. Iranian Vampires.
It's a great movie. I know the filmmaker a little bit, Anna Liliana Mifur. She is great.
The film is incredible, but the prequel graphic novel, it's from Aftershock, and Aftershock does... that's a lie. No, it's from Behemoth. But It's such a beautifully drawn book. It's like $9.99. You can get the whole thing. It's a prequel to the film. It's really worth your coin. What about you, Keith? What's knees popping with you? I see you with the Batman sweatshirt on right now. I see you.
Ironically, it's got nothing to do with Batman. I got two things that are popping. Longtime followers of this podcast know I am also a theater geek, as well as a superhero and action figure collector. So two big things came out this week that I'm very excited for. One is news that they are finally making a film adaptation of Wicked, and John Chu is directing it. And I bring this up only because
Wicked.
I saw
3 years ago I tweeted, and I'll link to it in the show notes, when it was announced that John was directing In the Heights, which comes out on HBO Max later this year, that his next movie should be Wicked. This was 3 years ago I tweeted this out. 5 years ago, I tweeted out a whole thread of Asian American actors that they should cast in Wicked to play all of the main characters. And I'm not saying that John is going to be casting a bunch of Asian Americans. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But I'm just saying I predicted it 3 years ago that John Chu would direct the movie adaptation of Wicked, and here we are. Basically, what I'm saying is I should get a part of his fee.
I think you should get a producer credit.
I should get a producer
where's
credit.
Your film credit?
On
Definitely
Wicked.
John, a producer.
John, I know you're listening.
Credit?
I need a producer credit on Wicked. The other thing that I'm excited about is the Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella that was a ABC family movie in 1997 starring Brandy, Whitney Houston, is finally coming to Disney Plus this Friday. So after you watch Judas and the Black Messiah on HBO Max, switch over to Disney Plus and watch Brandy, Whitney Houston.
You can watch a literal
Impossible.
Cinderella story. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
No, and for me, it's like it's finally it took forever that to be fine. It's like that's the only Cinderella we watched. We only know about. Come on now.
Yep.
Yeah, Pablo Montalban as the Prince Charming, Whitney Houston as the fairy godmother, and Brandy as Cinderella. It's a classic, and it's coming to Disney Plus. So yeah, the real Cinderella is finally coming to Disney Plus. That's it. That's it for Hard NOC Life. Hey, how can everyone get to you on the internet? Let's start with Shawn and go backwards. How can people find you on the internet? And what's popping on Surviving Creativity this week?
So I'm at Real Love Punk on Twitter. Don't really do much else. Surviving Creativity. This week's episode will drop on Tuesday. It's really about committing to projects. It's really about understanding how to, as creatives, we're so great at coming up with ideas, but it's hard to execute because of the rabbit holes we fall into. And I give some tools on how to commit to a project and see it through to fruition. And on this Saturday, February, 13th, I'm doing from 11 to 12:30 a free workshop based on the podcast. You can go to www.shawntaylor.net/workshops and I'm signing up for free. It closes tomorrow at midnight. And so it's 90 minutes. You get a workbook, and it's going to be a crisp 90 minutes, so don't be late.
Nice. We will drop the link in the show notes as well. Dominic Ma, how can people find you on the internet?
I'm Dominic Ma at Doma, Dommah. Kind of like the Vietnamese curse word, but not exactly.
Jamal Michelle, how can you be found on the internet?
I'm on Twitter at XPROSPERE, XProsper. Also, my writing and stuff is online, jamalmichelle.com. That's Michel, not Mitchell, not Michael, Michelle. Please, dear Lord.
Apparently, people get French last names mispelled, mispronounced. Monica Rambo.
Where are we finding you at, Keith?
You can find me on Twitter at @TheRealChild, _real_child. Follow the Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color, and go to hardknockmedia.com to find this podcast and all the podcasts in the Hard NOC family, including Southern Fried Asian, Ask Bi Girls, Dates Geek Girls Who Watch. We're Not All Ninjas. Sean's old podcast is up there. I might stick a link to Surviving Creativity on the Hard NOC Media.
Yeah, take that one off. Take that one off.
You can subscribe and download on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere you get podcasts, including YouTube.com. You can find this podcast on YouTube as well as all of our exclusive videos. Jamal has a bunch of interviews you can check out on YouTube as well. So please subscribe, smash that subscribe button on YouTube.com. Support us on Patreon, GoFundMe, buy some stuff on TeePublic. Just support the Nerds of Color as best as you can. We will be back next week on Hard NOC Life. Thanks, everyone.
Both will smash that subscribe button.
Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the Hard NOC Life, but not the chicken kind, more like the people.